Hey guys, what's up? It's Samantha, and I am sitting down to do a plan with me for the week of April 20th through the 26th. And this week I am using the Blossom Kit by Scribble Prints Co. And I pulled in the lavender hollow foil from both the first wiggle she did and then the lavender hollow that was included with the monthly subscription, I think this past month. And then I also pulled in some regular hollow foil. But yeah, this week I'm just going to be talking about the books that I read once again. And unfortunately, this was the beginning of a streak of really bad books. There were a couple in there that were okay, but I read so many one-star books in the next couple of weeks. I just was beside myself. And I also DNF'd a couple of books, which I don't think I'm going to talk about because most of them I didn't get that far into, but I just had a really bad run where I could not find a book that I liked, and it was a real pain. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into talking about all of the books I read during this week, or at least that I finished during this week. I always just talk about the books on the week that I finished them, and, you know, if you are not into planning, then just listen to me talk about books, minimize the screen, put me on in the background, and if you don't really care about the books, but you want to watch the planning, feel free to mute me talking and put on your own music. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into it. So the first book that I finished this week was an ARC that I received. I always like to disclaim if it was an ARC, just because I'm not paying for the book. It's given to me for free by the publisher. And this was an ARC of The Time of Our Lives by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegeman Broca. This is a YA contemporary romance novel, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was super cute. It would be the perfect YA contemporary to recommend to teens, especially people who are starting to look at colleges and balancing the different elements of what do I want to do with my life and what my family expects of me and what my friends expect of me and how do I balance relationships and all of this. And it was like super cute book. It was definitely YA, but it was like a fun, cute book. Didn't do anything wildly new and inventive, but definitely a solid addition to any YA contemporary romance collection at a library. And as a librarian, definitely something that I would recommend to my teens. Then the next book I read was very old. It's not very old. It's about a decade old, but it feels so dated. It is Abandoned by Meg Cabot, which I love Meg Cabot's contemporary, and I had never read this series by her. I've read pretty much not everything, but like close to everything that she's written that's YA. The Princess Diaries is one of my all-time favorite series, and even when I reread it as an adult, I crack up laughing. I feel like it holds up, and it doesn't feel dated. It's very I guess held up, that would be the term for that. I've already said that. So I had actually gotten the second book of this for free when I worked in a special collection while I was in grad school. We used to get sent boxes of books by publishers, and then we would sell them at the end of the year, anything that we weren't keeping as part of the collection, and they were always finished copies. And also a lot of the professors that worked in the department and with the special collection that I was part of were on review committees. So we would get boxes and boxes and boxes of these books, and I'd have to organize them. And then at the end, they would do a book sale for local teachers, and we got to go through the collection and pick out a handful of books that we wanted to take for ourselves before the sale as sort of like a thank you for working for us sort of thing. And one of them was the second book in this series. So I've had the second book of this sitting on my shelf for years. And I was like, you know what? I want to read something fluffy. I want to read something fun. This seems like it's going to be, a 2010 paranormal thing. I never really liked Twilight. I was kind of too old for Twilight by the time it came out, and I made myself read it, and I absolutely hate Twilight. I hated it the first time I read it. Still don't like it now. I'm not shitting on anyone that likes it. If you like Twilight, like, go you. It just was that paranormal thing just never really worked for me. And this book series is no exception. I gave this 1.5 stars. I truly am so confused. I'm wondering if Meg Cabot actually wrote this, because this did not have any of her trademark witty banter or humor. it felt like I was reading a book by a totally different author. It just wasn't good at all. There was no plot. The relationship was super troubling. Like every other Meg Cabot book I've ever read has had very strong female characters and lots of like an emphasis on sort of feminism. She's always had really strong like feminist characters in her books, and this relationship was super icky. The guy was really controlling, and like there was no explanation, and she was like basically told to like sit down and shut up and be pretty, and she was like, okay, I guess I'll just be nicer. Like, he's really mean to me, but like if I'm just sweet and nice, then he won't have a reason to be mean to me anymore. And it was just so weird. I don't know. I really did not like this book at all, but it was not the worst book I read this week. So the next book I read was not the worst book I read this week. This was actually the best book I read this week, and this was a graphic novel. It was Check Please, Book 2, Sticks and Scones by Ngozi Ukazu. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is the sequel to the first book, obviously, in the series. It's the second one. It's a gay hockey romance graphic novel, but it's not like explicit. It is in our like YA graphic novel collection, but it takes place during the 4 years of college, following a college hockey team, and one of the kids on the hockey team is gay and kind of dealing with his experience being a gay hockey player and eventually coming out and being in a relationship and some of the sort of like taboo elements of being gay in hockey. And then this book was just cute. It was adorable. It was fun. I have nothing to complain about. The only thing that with this series is there's a romance, and it was super underdeveloped in the first book. And I feel like it went from like, I wasn't entirely convinced at the end, like they're all of a sudden in a super serious relationship. And it was just weird to me because I feel like that wasn't developed super well. Like there was a crush in the first book, but I don't know. So then the next book that I read was probably the worst book that I've read this year. I can't fathom reading a book that I like less than I liked this book, and that is The Best Laid Plans by Cameron Lund, which is a YA contemporary romance. And I could give a book like 0 stars, but I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This book was absolutely garbage. So I was reading this because I was looking for, like, the synopsis made it sound like there was going to be like this pact that was like a girl who was insecure about still being a virgin. She's a senior in high school, and she started dating this guy that she works with who's a sophomore in college, and she's feeling very insecure about being inexperienced, and she sort of is roping her best guy friend, who is like this player who sleeps around a bunch, to like show her the ropes kind of thing. That's what the synopsis made this sound like. None of that happens in this book. They are friends, and over 50% of the way into this book, the concept of that is brought up, and then nothing actually happens between them. There's no communication. It's super icky. The way like other girls are talked about and the way sex is talked about is so icky, and like, I hate using this word, but like really problematic. And it's not like ideas are brought up and then the writer is sort of saying like, these aren't good ideas and like you shouldn't think about sex this way. It's just presented in a very, very icky way. It made me feel so gross. And unfortunately, I could only get this on audiobook through my library because the wait for the ebook was super duper long. So if this had been an ebook, I could have like skimmed through it, but I had to listen to all of this like cringy stuff on audio. And then at the end, like the main character is like the queen of the dumb bitch club. She is, oh my goodness gracious. At the end of this book, like spoilers, like skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear this. I don't know why any of you would want to read this book. But at the end, she goes to sleep with this college dude and then changes her mind. This is like at prom night at the hotel that their prom is held at. And she decides she's going to go like find her best friend and like declare her love for him, and she pulls a fire alarm because he had gone up to a room with another girl and he wasn't answering his cell phone. So she pulls the fire alarm and then runs into the building to find this guy. And then, like, they have sex in a closet while the firemen are trying to clear the building, and like they get arrested. And she's like, tee-hee, like, I didn't know that was a misdemeanor. Like, how do you graduate from high school and not know that it's illegal to pull a fire alarm, like falsely pull a fire alarm? And she's like so stupid. And you're supposed to be like, oh, that's so cute. And the entire time I was like, that is so stupid. This isn't romantic. Like, this is stupid and selfish, and like, the whole thing was just a dumpster fire. There was nothing redeeming about this book. It is truly the worst YA contemporary romance I've ever read. I do not recommend buying this for your collection. I don't think it has anything worthwhile in it that, like, I'd never, ever, ever recommend this book to anyone. Like, usually if I don't like a book, there's still like the right kind of reader that I would recommend that book to, which is sometimes why I read books that I don't particularly enjoy, because then I at least know who to recommend it to, because I read as part of my job for recommending books. But this I would not recommend to anyone whatsoever at all. Don't buy this for your collection. Just don't. Like, this is a worthless book, and I don't think anyone should read it because it was garbage. And I could not in good conscience recommend it to a teenager just because of how icky and problematic all of the content is. Like, I would never want someone who, like a 15-year-old, to read that and think that that's like what sex is supposed to be like, or that you're supposed to be like so insecure about being a virgin when you're 17. Like, ugh. Okay. And then the last book I finished this week was The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I was able to get a 7-day hold for the audiobook of this through my library. They had one of those like lucky copies or whatever they call them, but you get it for a week and there's no holds list for it. And I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. So the writing of this was absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, wonderful. I would totally read something else written by Emily St. John Mandel in the future. Loved the writing. This book depressed the heck out of me. So like, I loved the writing, but I didn't really like the content. It was so just heavy and depressing. There was no hope. There was no redemption for anyone in this story. It was just all about a group of absolutely horrible humans doing horrible things to each other. And I thought this was going to have more like magic realism or more kind of fantastical or surreal elements to it. And there's kind of a small element of that doesn't really get introduced into like the last quarter of the book, and it's very, very minimal and very vague. And it's not like, if you're a person who's into magic realism, this feels more like contemporary, like lit fic sort of thing. It doesn't feel like fabulism, surrealism, magic realism, like whatever words you want to use to describe that type of writing. It didn't really feel like that. I was so depressed and anxious by the time this book was over. Like, I just wanted to sit in a corner and cry, but like not in that cathartic way. Like, it just made me be like, life is pointless and like, we're all gonna die. End of story. And it was just not the right mood or time for me to read that story. So, like I said, beautiful writing. Absolutely loved the prose. Did not like the content. So, I mean, I still gave it 3 stars. Like, I'm still glad I read it. Like, I see the literary value of it. I just didn't really love it all that much by the end. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, it was just a really bad reading week for me. I did start, like, at the end of the week, I think I started the first Dresden book, which sort of is going to take over my reading life in the next few videos that I'm talking about reading. So you'll get to hear all about that. But yeah, in terms of like what actually happened in my real life this week, this is the week after I got furloughed. And this is also the week that I posted that YA fantasy like response to Daniel Green video, and I was so sick to my stomach when I posted that video. I had terrible anxiety from like Tuesday through Thursday, like literally sick to my stomach when I posted that video. I was so nervous to do that, and the response ended up being really positive, but I was so anxious about it, and I was just kind of a total wreck. That was like what I did Tuesday. On Monday, I sort of wrote the outline for that video, and I'd filmed something else on Monday that I never ended up posting, but I did it all on Tuesday and then just uploaded it. That way I couldn't back out. I wasn't going to wait till the next day because I knew I wouldn't read it if I waited. And I did get to, I don't know, I just had like a pretty chill back half of the week because I'd been so anxious and I was just like completely worn out and exhausted. And then nothing else really happened. Oh, I got through to unemployment. I called literally all day for like 8 hours straight on Friday and finally got through to unemployment to get my problem fixed. And ever since then, I've had zero problems and it's been working, been getting my unemployment and stuff. But that was adding to the stress too, because I'd screwed up my unemployment and like I needed to get paid and it was pretty much impossible to get through. So this is the finished spread. I hope you guys liked it. I'm sorry I didn't have too much positive stuff to say about books this week, but you know, it happens. Had a bad streak in there. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye, guys.